let's focus on the moment in time. Yesterday, we had our buddy Jason Lloyd from the Combine. Today, we'll have Aditi from the Combine. She's coming on at 12, right?
12.
Aditi at 12.
And these dudes get to go everywhere.
They do. And yesterday, Kevin Stefanski speaking today.
He's speaking today.
And Andrew Berry spoke yesterday. And Andrew Berry was surprisingly,
he said some
at
stuff.
least a tiny bit candid. I found it funny that one of his answers he said like, "Oh, I don't mean to like be, mislead you," or I can't remember the exact words he used, but he always means to mislead us, so that was untrue. But one thing he did say, he did admit of the John Johnson thing, which is interesting because it's not official, and so usually they don't admit anything that's not official. So I was a little surprised by that. And then he talked about a potential restructure for Deshaun Watson. Now, we want to get into that, but before we do, G, you were not here yesterday for your buddy Jonathan being cut. What do you have to say about that? You didn't get a chance to chime in.
Well, look, I don't really never jump off the roof and just say I'm glad somebody got cut. At the end of the day, that's his livelihood.
Well, he'll get another job.
But he'll get another job.
Yep.
He'll land somewhere else. It's a big boy league. It is what it is. He understands it. But one of the things that I thought was very interesting is I've always had a problem at the way they have not been transparent enough. They have not, they don't do yourself any favors by getting up at the end of the season. And their end of the season press conference was one of the worst I've ever seen. They basically told you, hey, we punted on the season, so what? We're not going to give you anything concrete. We don't know why it didn't work. And they did that after the season, during the season, and before the season. So, one of the things that goes on is people don't understand that there is a Game of Thrones. There's a way you have to finesse the situation. You have to be good communicators. At some point in time, you need to have allies in the media. And the fans are going to want answers, right? So sometimes it's great to give those answers. It doesn't mean you're going to get fired. It doesn't mean that you guys are just letting all the cats out the bag. What you're doing is you're giving information so that people can say, okay, I understood that. Okay, I got that. They kept all the information inside, and then what they started to realize was we have no allies. If we don't get it done in these 6 games, we're out of here. They could have bought them time by having better communication skills, which they lacked. So now I think that they feel that they're behind the 8 ball. They're behind. They feel the pressure of saying, wow, we really have to go out here and we got to do everything we need to do. And get rid of John Johnson is just the first move on the roster of saying and admitting that they missed, because that was one of their big home runs.
Yeah.
Troy Hill, miss. Tack McKinley got hurt, miss.
2 of their 3 top free agent signings in this Berry-Stefanski duo, Austin Hooper did not make it to his final year of his free agency contract.
Hey,
wow.
And John Johnson
those were
did
both
not.
terrible signings. Neither one panned out.
And those were the big signing. Hooper was the big signing of his first year. John Johnson was the big signing of his second year. So, we've criticized Berry, and rightfully so, for his inability to find A-plus talent in the draft at respective positions, which may change with Emerson. But I think an even more fair criticism is his evaluation of free agency and paying the wrong guys to come into the system and utilize them to the maximum capabilities they have, because Hooper never found his rhythm, and John Johnson was out of place for 2 years.
They've done a better job with some of the lower tier free agents, right? Like Ethan Pocic, like I can't get anybody's name the last couple
Taven Bryan?
No, the linebacker got hurt from the Colts.
Anthony Walker.
What's wrong with me? My brain
Bull forgot everybody's.
not functioning these last couple days.
He forgot everyone on the
brain is
Bengals.
just
The
spurting.
Rolodex?
Yeah, I don't know what's happened with my brain the last couple of days. But anyway, so some of those lower level free agent moves have been okay. But listen, now to be fair, I think we all liked the John Johnson signing when it happened.
Yeah.
I think we all liked the Hill signing when it happened. I know I loved the Austin Hooper signing. I thought he was going to be great here. He wasn't. He was terrible. So, but our job, we don't get paid to make the right transactions. We get paid to entertain and get people to watch or listen or whatever. So if we don't do our job, then we lose our job. Just like if you don't acquire talent as a GM, that's your job.
Yeah.
And Andrew Berry hasn't been terrible for 3 years, but he's far from been good enough.
He's been average.
Average at best. Yeah. Now, that's an upgrade over what some of the previous GMs are, but you can't go. It was just like with Baker. When you and I don't know if you had this experience, G, but when I was saying move on from Baker, and I know you were saying move on from Baker, I would often get, the response was always, but he won us a playoff game.
Yep.
But he's better than what we had. Well, the goal is not to be better than what you had.
What are the alternatives? The best since 99, the greatest.
None of that matters. Like, yes, Andrew Berry has done a better job as GM, and Kevin Stefanski has done a better job as GM as most of the other Browns coaches for the last 10, 12 years. And that's a positive. But the goal is not to be mediocre. If the goal was to be mediocre, these guys would be all-stars.
Well, the Giants are going through that right now with Daniel Jones. They're going to have to pay him as a great quarterback. And we saw for one season, Daniel Jones is more than serviceable.
Right.
But you're going to pay him in the same tier as the Burrows, the Herberts, the Watsons, the Mahomes. He wants $45 million a year. You can't be
that's a terrible
good and be paid to be great because that's when it hamstrings everything else on the roster.
Well, that's true.
And back to Deshaun Watson, which we're going to talk about restructuring in a sec. If Deshaun Watson is great, he's worth every damn penny that they pay him. And there's not a single question, debate, argument about it.
No.
The issue is if he's not the player who's making whatever money, and we'll find out next year in the coming years, then your roster's screwed and you're really hamstrung with moves all across the board.
That's true, and it was interesting as you bring it up, so we'll get to it, that Andrew Berry did bring up the potential of restructuring.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
You have to do it. Obviously, Deshaun Watson's would have no reason to be on board. They're not taking away any of the money he's going to make.
Can I explain for people out there? I wrote down a 5-step process.
Yeah.
This is what restructuring in the NFL means in terms of contracts. And I did some research on this to make sure I had it right. I know we had a discussion with Amari Cooper later. Why would he do it? We may have not had everything right. So this is what restructuring a contract means. It means, one, the exact same amount of total money. Deshaun Watson will get his $230 million,
potentially.
or more.
But not less.
But he will not get $1 less than was already negotiated.
Right.
It is the same amount of years. They're not going to add years onto the end of the contract. They're not going to take years off the contract. It is the exact same amount of years. What it does is the player, Deshaun Watson in this case, would get paid up front, turning his roster bonus into a signing bonus, which what that does is gives the Browns short-term cap relief, but future cap costs rise.
It pushes back the cap hit.
So, for example, Watson's supposed to make $53 million each of the next 4 years. What they can do, theoretically speaking, and we don't know the exact numbers, but they could cut $30 million off it from this year and make that $53 million hit a $23 million hit.
Yeah.
Right.
And then it's $63 million for each of the next 3 years after that,
and for
or however they spread it out.
Yeah, but essentially when you do that, there's no change to what from Deshaun Watson's perspective, it's
he gets paid $230 million
Nothing
guaranteed,
changes
no matter what.
Now, if they wanted to make it a longer contract, well, then you're renegotiating
anyway,
something else potentially. But just to restructure, we see that all the time. Eventually, you do have to pay the piper on this.
Yes.
I mean, it does come to a point. Everybody's, we've talked about the cap being a myth, and I've even said it. Eventually, there is some you come due. Like the Saints have done it for years, but they've lost some players over.
Absolutely.
The way, right, and they're not that good a team anymore. So eventually, you got to pay for it. But I think right now, with the position the Browns are in, you don't really want to take that $50 million cap hit this year.
No. You can't. You have no money to upgrade your team elsewhere if you're paying Deshaun Watson $53 million.
They're going to have to do that a couple years.
Right. And the key to me is beyond, like, the obvious is that Deshaun Watson has to be a top 10 quarterback, right? Essentially, he's got to be at least a tier 2 quarterback for them to have a chance.
Yeah.
Like, the tier 1 is
Mahomes, Burrow, and then you could debate one or two other guys.
I think Herbert, Allen, maybe Hurts, maybe Lamar Jackson, right? Maybe if Lamar stays healthy, if Hurts does it again, I'd put those two guys in there. So at most, there's 6 tier 1 quarterbacks. So at the very least, Deshaun Watson has to get into that second tier, which is 7 to 12. At the very least. Now, I'm expecting him because in Houston, he played like a tier 1 quarterback. Yeah. That's what I'm expecting and hoping. But at the very least, he's got to get to tier 2 because you can win with a tier 2 quarterback if the team's good around him. But besides Deshaun, guys, the key is going to be, and the reason you push the salary cap off is because you hope that as you draft more players, that those guys, so in other words, 2 years from now, you're either Bitonio or Teller will be gone 2 years from now, right?
Facts.
Maybe both. Jack Conklin's probably gone. Amari Cooper's probably gone. So all that money is going to be gone. Now, you will have to pay some other guys, but the hope is that for at least some of that time, you're getting that talent, that performance from younger guys. Now, it's fair to say that Andrew Berry has not been able to do that with any consistency. There's been some of that, but Donovan Peoples-Jones, Martin Emerson, Greg Newsome to some degree. There's been some of that, but not enough. But that's going to be the key. Yeah. That's the key. Once you start paying guys, you have to have young guys come in so when you push the cap, you can make up that hit by getting rid of some of the other veterans.
And Boo, I look at it, and we talk about this offensive defensive thing, right, a lot. We talk about what's more important, what's going to get you to the next level. And for me, I look at it a situation where I say Deshaun Watson, my number one goal is to get him in that top 7. And what does that? Getting a defensive tackle doesn't do that. Getting edge rushers that are guys in the draft, 2nd, 3rd round edge rushers aren't going to do that. What's going to do that? A wide receiver. When you look at positions in need, everyone says inside linebacker, everyone says defensive tackle. But to be honest with you, if a guy comes in the league and he's a game buster at defensive tackle, what are you going to get? 3 sacks from him? Maybe. He's a rotational guy. If you get an edge guy, what is he going to do? He got 8 sacks? I mean, you got to realize those are impacted. They do count in the game. But when you say he needs to be in the top 5 to be competitive, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And so as an organization, they have to look at people that can get him to the top 5. So, yes, they're probably going to have to go out and find an aging receiver that has a name or has some sort of skill set. Is that a wise move? Not really if you're looking for 3 to 5 years. But like you said, I'm only looking for 2 years. Batonio going to be gone in a couple years. Teller is going to be gone in a couple years. Mari Cooper is gone in a couple years. So what you got to do is maximize what you could do with those guys now. And I feel wide receiver is a position that can maximize the end of those guys' prime and get them to a place that they need to go quicker than some other positions.
And the reality is, G, that they don't have to ignore those other positions, even if they get a wide receiver. Right? I mean, it's not like they're, the Browns are not in a great salary cap position where they've been for many years, but it's not like they're in a terrible salary cap position either. And especially if they restructure, they've cut Johnson, they restructure Watson, maybe you even renegotiate with Amari Cooper. Forget a restructure. Maybe you extend him another year and find a way,
put it less.
To spread it out, spread his money out. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there. And, so I think there are avenues to do that. I would, listen, in the end, you may be right. They may have to get a veteran receiver. That kind of hurts them after a year or two. I would love for them to try to go after a guy who's in their prime more at wide receiver, even if it means they have to give up a lot in the trade. I'd rather them give up draft assets
for a proven
younger wide receiver. Now, that's not easy. Okay. A bunch were traded last year, but, and I don't know, who knows who might be available. But I would rather them give up more to get a receiver in his prime, even though that might not be possible this offseason.
So they cut John Johnson yesterday. That saved $9.75 million.
Right.
When they restructure Watson's contract, and notice I say when, not if. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of when it becomes official. That's going to open up between $30 and $35 million in cap space. So between those two moves, just cutting Johnson, restructuring Watson, the Browns go from under $13 million or $13 million over the cap to about 17, 18, 20-ish million dollars under the cap to spend on a receiver, a defensive tackle, a linebacker, a safety, you name it, plus draft capital.
Right.
I'm sure that's not their only moves. There are some other guys they can cut, restructure.
Yeah.
I think the Browns are going to have about $40 million when it's all said and done to work with in free agency, G. And when you look at the list of wide receivers in free agency, none of those guys I think are going to get a massive bag.
Well, I don't mean, listen, Marvin Jones got a massive bag last year, which none of us expected.
Right.
Fair.
Not Marvin Jones.
Zay Jones.
No.
Christian Kirk.
Christian Kirk. I'm not Marvin Jones. Christian Kirk, same team as Zay Jones.
But Christian Kirk is, if he was on that list that we show, he'd be hands down by far the best receiver on that list.
Yeah, but I don't think Christian Kirk.
And by the way, Christian Kirk proved he was worth every dollar. He was a legitimate.
He was, but he had not proven it before last year.
Yeah.
Fair.
That's why we all thought it was a stupid move. So there may be a guy in that group that the Browns look at and say, maybe this guy, maybe it's Darius Slayton or Mecole Hardman.
We've said it before, I like Hardman and Renfrow on this list the most.
The only thing I would say, my problem with those two guys, I like, again, I can't think of a name, the guy from Green Bay. Lazard. Isn't he a free agent? Why is he not on that list?
I'm not sure if he's a free agent, but when we made this list, we were looking at Renfrow, because I made this list. Renfrow is a slot guy, the other four are speed guys.
Well, okay, fine.
Those
But
are not
I
a speed
just,
guy,
in
but he's
the
a big
end,
target.
I want the Browns to get the best receiver they can get, even if it's not necessarily a speed guy. Here's my problem with Renfro and Hardman. Hardman hasn't done that much playing with the best quarterback and the smartest coach.
And he struggles to stay healthy.
So
I will admit.
how am I going to? Why would I believe he's got more upside when he
Right.
couldn't do it with the best team? Especially this past year. You could argue the years before that, well, they had Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Well, this year they only had Kelce.
He did have a touchdown in 6 straight games before he got hurt, though.
I hear you, but he's not a number 1, number 2 wide receiver. I don't think he's ever going to be.
If they went out and got another number 1, and you added him in on that,
Right.
I'd be like, oh, that's a nice
I'm
move.
agreed.
That's a nice move.
do you consider real
if
quick?
Hardman's the second best receiver you bring in this
That's
season,
great.
that's good.
I'm feeling good about
Not
that.
the best.
Let me ask you guys a question.
Yeah.
I think we'll agree on the first. I'm not sure how you feel on the second. Hopkins, just theoretically speaking, is a number 1 guy still. Do you look at him as a number 1 receiver?
Yes.
I guess
You
so.
do, I know.
I am worried about the age, as we talked about, but if he doesn't have that age 31 drop-off, which not everybody does, then probably yes. Or maybe not a top-tier 1 anymore, but
he's a
still a
1.
1.
And let's be clear, the age scares me. It does. I mean,
Yeah.
it
But you
does.
still want him.
But I still, based on our circumstances, I think they just have to be aggressive.
Brandon Cooks, is he a number 1 guy?
I think he's a lower tier number
I think
1.
I think he's a 2.
I agree more with you in the 2. So
Yeah.
going off what you said, bringing in a legit number 1, we saw Devontae Adams. We saw Tyreek Hill. Who else moved last year? Big-time receiver.
There was one other. Oh, A.J. Brown.
A.J. Brown. So we saw 3 legitimate, bona fide, certified, no-brainer number
Imagine
1s
if they had
move.
one of those guys.
Yeah, man.
Silly.
It's crazy.
I'm not sure with the success those 3 had, even though the Raiders sucked, Devontae was phenomenal this year.
Yeah.
Tyreek completely changed the entire outlook of Miami's offense. A.J. Brown made a Super Bowl with Philadelphia. I'm not sure if GMs are going to be so willing just to trade a guy of that stature.
Yeah, but
this
you know
year.
what? In the end, if team feels they can't afford to pay a guy, or if the guy wants out, other teams are. Ideally, nobody wants to trade a guy like that. You want that guy in your team, but sometimes it becomes a situation where you can't. My concern about Hunter Renfro, I'm not really high on Hunter Renfro. He had a good year 2 years ago, and let's face it, I don't mean to make everything about race, but people get excited when a white guy does good at receiver. They get a little overhyped sometimes. He is a nice player, but what he did 2 years ago, which was nice, that's his ceiling to me.
Fair.
Now, I understand he played with Deshaun Watson, so that's a reason. I don't have a problem if they get him. But again, I think of him, not that he's the same kind of player as Hardman, but I think of him like Hardman. If he's the second best receiver I get, if you tell me next year they're going to go with, let's say, Hopkins, Cooper, DPJ, and Renfro,
Now all of a sudden,
yeah.
I go from 2.
Yeah, I'm in. I
wait.
don't want Renfro. I don't want any of those guys being my top wide receiver this year.
So let's hypothetical world.
Yeah.
The Browns get Hopkins. They
Yeah.
sign. We want to go Renfro or Coleman. Who do we want to go with just for this?
Coleman?
McCole Hardman. Sorry.
Oh, Hardman. Yeah.
I combine his names.
I would think in that case, Hardman makes more sense because
Yes,
he'd be the
'cause
one
he's
speed guy.
fast.
Okay, so let's go with Hopkins, Cooper, DPJ, McCole Hardman,
Yeah.
and Njoku at tight end.
Right.
How mad is Jay going to get when Nick Chubb gets 14 carries a game? Because they're throwing the ball 73 times with all those
I see
receivers.
what you
He'll
said.
only get mad
I
if
see
they
what you
lose.
did. Like,
When they lose.
But they're going to be 3-0 when he runs for 20 or more carries, and somehow they'll lose a random game where he does it. That's just
I think that'll be out the window.
It better be. If
It'll
they
be
got
out the
those for it,
window.
better be out the window.
Because what you'll start to see is not only will we understand that the better way to go about trying to win is throwing the football, Nick Chubb will see it. Like, man, they got these dudes out here, and the runs Nick Chubb will get,
It's going to open up everything.
He'll hit home runs. You think about it. When is the last time you saw one of those big 60, 70-yard runs by Nick Chubb? You have to go back to not this year.
He had a 50-yarder this year,
But
didn't he?
last year against the Bengals. Remember, he split the defense?
Yeah.
But what that tells me is he has to make a lot of guys miss, and there's a lot of people in that box.
Yeah,
I mean, he has yards per carry. But sometimes he used to have those home runs. Those home runs are getting less. He's hitting doubles now and some triples, not home runs. So if you got a situation where you are throwing the ball, you are going downhill, and you are spreading the field, you'll start to see Nick Chubb, instead of those 8-yard runs, 10, 12, you'll start to see some of those 30, 40, 50s again.
Hey, the reality is, I know there was a lot of complaint about it, but I said this last year and I'll say it again. You look at the teams that have a running back that carries the ball a ton, those teams generally are mediocre or worse.
Nope.
And the reality is that if Deshaun Watson plays like the guy he was in Houston, then Nick Chubb will end up carrying it a lot in the fourth quarter because the Browns will have a lot of games where they'll have a lead, and then who's better to salt it away than Nick Chubb in the fourth quarter?
Nobody.
Who's as good as anybody in that situation?
0 people.
So if Nick Chubb's averaging 14 and a half carries and the Browns are winning, who cares?
I'm just Jay's the
care.
only one that's gonna care.
Jay will not care if they're winning.
No.
Nobody will care if they're winning.
He ain't gonna trip, because what'll happen is you're gonna start to see the Browns put major points up. When the last time you seen a Browns team be vertical, truly vertical, not tight end vertical. I mean, truly deep threat vertical. Even when we had OBJ and Jarvis Landry, we didn't throw deep ball.
I don't think verticality.
Derek Anderson, maybe?
That's it.
With Josh Gordon. Right? Like
Brandon
that.
Henry.
No, Derek Anderson was Josh
For
Gordon,
whatever
right?
reason, you guys have told me 25 times that Derek Anderson wasn't Josh Gordon's quarterback. I will never remember that. That just is one thing. It goes in one ear, out the other every time.
I mean,
I've got that wrong at least 15 times.
That good year with Derek Anderson, they were a vertical team. But that was a long time ago.
It was almost dang near 10 years between Derek Anderson and
Gee, what do you think of this, though? So Stefanski comes in 2020 with OBJ, Jarvis Landry. OBJ is a vertical threat in the receiver position. Didn't happen at a high rate. Mm-hmm. We come back, fast forward 2 years with Watson, Brissett, that combination. Cooper's not truly a deep threat. DPJ's not truly a deep threat. We keep but we want to see more verticality stretch the defense. Do you think that's in Stefanski's play card? Is that on the Denny sheet somewhere? Or is his offense just kind of designed to stay in that mid-tier, mid-passing range?
Oh, this is an easy question. If you go back and look at what Deshaun Watson said in that Quincy Avery interview. He said, Bill O'Brien was the most aggressive coach that he had been around. And he said, I had guys out there that could run like Brandon Cooks. What's the guy that we wanted? But
Will Fuller.
Will Fuller.
Yeah, I'm getting my brain back.
There you go. I'm losing mine. Will Fuller and DeAndre Hopkins. He said he used to let me go out there, and he was the most aggressive throwing the ball down the field coach I've ever had.
He throws a great deep ball.
And he throws a beautiful deep ball with air touch. He could get it there. But he said with Kevin Stefanski, he said, well, look, they was running a different type of offense with Jacoby Brissett. He has the most structure for a quarterback that I've ever been in, where I didn't even have to do much thinking. And I would just go out there and play. He had a lot of guardrails. And that's the second time I've heard a quarterback say that. Baker Mayfield said that.
Yep.
Deshaun Watson has now said that. And so what it looks like to me is that Kevin Stefanski has an offense that is predicated on simple throws, fundamentals, getting the ball downfield. But in this league, people's too fast. People's too good. They scheme for you. The little boots, the little dink and dunk over the middle to the tight end, that'll get it done against the bad teams. But when you play good teams, they're going to lock all that up. They're going to be like, well, we just going to pressure you. So I think Kevin Stefanski has not had a quarterback who he's let blossom into throwing the ball down the field. And that is because he has thought he didn't have that type of skill set with Baker, Jacoby Brissett, or Kirk Cousins, to be frank about it.
All the way back to
all the way back. So I think he does have it. It could be in a playbook, but he hasn't shown it thus far.
No, and we're going to find out. I think people like me who have defended Kevin Stefanski have said, hey, he hasn't had a good quarterback. So it's fair. Okay, because the offense seems a little conservative. We want to see like some of these other teams that have these high-powered offenses where they're throwing the ball. We want to see that for the Browns. If we don't get that this year, I think we're all going to have a huge problem with it because he's got the quarterback now. Now, if you don't like Deshaun Watson is a Ferrari, right? Or at least he was. And it's a Ferrari that sat in the garage for 2 years.
Right.
So you're starting it up. It's coughing a little bit. It needs a tune-up. Got the tune-up last year. It needs some maintenance, maybe a paint job. But it's a Ferrari down deep. And you don't buy a Ferrari to just take it down the street.
No.
at 20 miles an hour. So he's got to treat Deshaun Watson next year like he treated a Ferrari. He's got to open it up. Right? I feel like that's something that G does.
No,
those kind of comparisons.
No, that was good.
That was good.
That
was good. Yeah.
But I think that's the case here, and he hasn't had it. He's had a bunch of Hondas and Toyotas,
Dodge pickup trucks.
He had a Geo Metro maybe.
Well, all right. So Brissett is.
By the way, I had a Geo Metro that did not have power steering, and I was like,
by the way, that's the greatest invention known to man. Power steering, bro. I had an old school Mustang.
Oh yeah.
The power steering went out. You'd be
the worst.
You'd be doing.
By the way, with my Geo Metro that I had, like 20 years ago, whenever it was, did not have power steering, and then right before I got rid of it, the car would not go in reverse.
What?
Something happened to the car. The car would not go for reverse. I was still driving it for like 3-4 days, and what I would have to, and I had
to pull into every spot.
I had to pull into every spot, right, and then I'd have to be able to pull out. So the only thing was at my house, I had a driveway that was like this. So I would pull in, and then get out. I would just roll
it down.
I would just roll. It would roll
in neutral. That's crazy.
In neutral. For like 3-4 days, maybe a week, I was driving it that way. Until I finally was able to get another car.
My goodness. Listen, back in the day, oh my goodness. I used to have I used to have this a Ford Taurus show model.
Yeah.
And so I had this Taurus. It was like a 94 or something, bro. So we used to call it the Silver Bullet. And I had these tinted windows and these beats in it. My stereo system got stole 2 times. By the way, and I don't know what the heck. Why was people listening to loud music like that? I'm confused.
People still do, not as much.
But it used to be bad.
It used to be bad.
With like the boombox.
If you had a subwoofer in your trunk and your whole car shook as you were driving down.
Man, when I was a kid, when I was like a teenager and I first started driving, like 17 or whatever, or my friends started driving. The big thing was to go. There's a street in Brooklyn called 86th Street. Anybody's ever been there if you live in Brooklyn or whatever. And it was a street that had a train going over it. And guys would like just go down there to try to find pretty girls. I never got no action there, but other people did. And everybody would just drive down the street playing their music loud like a bunch of clowns.
Before we pivot to the next topic real quick, if Deshaun Watson's a Ferrari, Anthony, last thing, then we'll let you go what you read.
Yeah.
If Watson's a Ferrari, what's Brissett? Is he a Ford pickup? Solid, durable?
He is he's like a Subaru.
He's a hybrid Prius.